people who are starting to drop out of the traditional education system end up kind of dropping into this global learning community of people who are contributing in creating educational resources, meeting other people, supporting other people, and just kind of collaborating to create a more diverse, rich educational experience. We're just talking about how we can use that to enhance young people's education, as well as like kind of what are all the ways that we can not only contribute to the global school, but how the global school can contribute and I guess helping us.
And we're trying to run multiple experiments to see how we can use technology and bring it to students from lower income groups.
Thank you, thank you. And I'd also like to introduce, I believe it's Dr. Malpani, and if I mispronounced that, then please correct me. But he's, out of everybody that I am connected with on Twitter, he seems to be the most well-versed in some of the educational challenges that are happening in India, where we're traveling to in about 3 weeks. Sumi and I, along with her team, are traveling across India for a little over a month. I think we're hitting 6 different cities all over. But part of that, a big part of that, is that uh, India is probably the country that is best positioned to align with what we're trying to do, which is very much a global learning community and taking advantage of the increasing array of various educational tools and opportunities and learning communities through the internet. So I invited him to co-host as well. He asked me, "What do you want me to do?" And I said, "Share all your opinions." Um, so feel free to jump in and share those opinions. I really enjoy watching your feed on Twitter. This everyday Twitter Spaces thing is something that kind of happened serendipitously when Chris and a few others came on, and we were supposed to be talking about data analytics for startups, but it quickly became a discussion of ed tech entrepreneurs talking about how the world's changing really, really fast, and we should probably wrap our heads around it. So that's the ongoing title, I'd say. So, hey, Chris, feel free to jump in too and just introduce yourself to the folks that are here, and then we can get started.
Yeah, and real quick, I see Dr. Malpani in here, but he's not up on stage yet. So he won't be able to speak and join the conversation.
Yep, no, I've sent him a few invites. I'm not sure. Sometimes that takes a while.
Awesome.
But
yeah, so my name's Chris, and I founded a platform that is vetting out online courses and coaches. So I'm on just the small niche of the education space, where we saw that there was a lot of people trying to get rich quick in the online education space. And so we wanted to create a safe environment where people can go and find trusted courses and coaches to grow and expand in all walks of life. And we cover all a vast array of courses is probably the best way to put it. But I'm very passionate about education. I think that the internet is changing everything. It's giving people who have not had access to education significant access. And this is something, Joe, you may not know, but I used to do a lot of mission work when I was younger. And when I was 17, we took over $1 million to this small town in South Africa called Mafeking, and we built a village there. And we were able to get some of the kids there through school, through high school, and even they were able to come to the States for college. And with that education, they've been able to turn Mafeking into a thriving city in South Africa, which is now impacting the surrounding area. And that was when I truly saw the power of education. And now that the hurdle of access has been removed, and you have things like AI and online programming, I think that we could really impact and change the world if we use the technology correctly.
Yeah, completely agree. I was trying to think of an example I could use to explain this concept of global school, and the best one I can come up with is what we're doing right now. I have no idea where everybody here is from, but it's only within the past 20 years, but really increasingly so in just recent years after the pandemic forced everybody to learn how to use, including all of our grandparents, our parents, to connect virtually and use these tools. That this is the true flattening of the world in terms of opportunities, and that's a big reason why we're going off to India, and then next year we'll either be going to Nigeria or Kenya to be connecting with others, and because like now it's possible to actually have a global school now. So super excited about that. I see Dr. Malpani, and again, correct me if I'm wrong in the name pronunciation, but would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, happy to do that. So I am a full-time practicing doctor. I'm also a pretty active angel investor, and we're trying to run multiple experiments to see how we can use technology and bring it to students from lower income groups.
All right, round of
It,
applause. Yay.
yeah, well, we don't have any success stories yet. All these are all experiments. We don't even know how many of them will work out or whether they'll work out. But I think it's a fun process because I think the need for the poorer students to have access is much more because the rich guys anyway have PCs at home. So I think but having said all this, I think we also need to be acutely aware of the fact that there are access issues, there are cost issues. Uh, I mean, India is actually multiple countries all put into one. And it's very rarely that you're going to get just one single solution which is going to fit everyone. So it's going to be a lot of, how do you drill down? Who's your first target market? How do you approach them? And then take it from there. But
So how
I'm
are you
optimistic.
approaching them? I'd love to hear more about how you got into this and
I got into this because I didn't like what the tuition classes or the commercial coaching classes are doing to the Indian education system. And this is actually getting progressively worse, which means most kids, instead of attending schools, are more interested in attending these coaching classes because their entire idea of schooling is, we need to score enough marks in our exams so that we can get into a college. And we need to score enough marks when we get out of college so we can get a job. So it's very linear. And I think it's the industrial age education system no longer going to work for the future. But parents don't know what to do. They're paralyzed into inactivity. They're just doing what everyone else is doing. And we're trying to think of what else we can do. So one set of experiments is we're saying we need to partner with educational NGOs who are already embedded in the community and who are trusted by the parents, and then provide them with technology, which is basically internet connected PCs. So we allow for peer-to-peer learning, we allow for access to online resources, we allow for adult supervision, and then we see where it takes us. Who knows?
may I ask where you're located specifically?
In Mumbai. Oh, but our
Okay.
centers are all over. Our centers are all over the country.
Okay.
So
That's smart.
it's a very hands-off approach. It's very bottom-up. So we basically tell people, we have a website called Apni. We tell people, please apply. If you fit our criteria, and our criteria is you need to be a recognized NGO, you need to have the space, you need to share the photographs with us. And if you're willing to build in public and you're willing to share what you learn, we'll send you the 10 PCs. And maybe some will use them, some won't use them. Who knows? Time will tell.
Oh wow, really cool. That I'd love to hear just a little bit more about just that 10 PC, like the application process. So you have an application process to essentially create the, hardware and the space to try to get something off the ground. Maybe you could talk a little bit
So
more about that.
we provide the hardware. We basically provide the PCs. We provide the 10 PCs. We don't charge them for that. Basically, and these are special PCs because they're made in India and they're educational PCs. So it's like a proper desktop.
Okay.
Think of it as perhaps an Arduino on steroids. So it's got a monitor, a webcam, speakers, and everything else. The reason we started with 10, there's nothing magic about 10, but we think we need to have a little bit of peer-to-peer learning. And if we have 10 PCs, there will be some bright kids who will teach the other ones and vice versa. And that's what I meant. It's an experiment. So we don't know what the right number is. We don't know where it's going to work. We don't know how well it's going to work. For people who want a curriculum, we're happy to provide them with a curriculum because all this stuff, these are all open educational resources available online. If people want to figure out stuff for themselves, we're very happy for them to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, they just send us an email. We vet their credentials, and if they're fine, we ship it, and we keep our fingers crossed.
Could you
What?
could you
Yeah,
tell
go
us
ahead.
a little bit about the landscape of India? How many like what how many average people have access to the internet? How long is it expensive? Do they have cell phones? For just those of us that are very naive and just don't understand as much as what the rest of the world looks like, what's the connectivity hurdle in India?
So lots of things have changed very dramatically, and internet access is great. India is already talking about 5G, and so the internet connectivity in about, I would say, nearly 95% of India, even in small villages, is quite all right, and it's extremely affordable. The problem is that what most people have as a digital device is a smartphone, which usually the father has. Uh, a lot of these people really can't afford an additional smartphone for their kids, which means the kids need to depend on a smartphone, their parents, as and when available. And again, they're a little conscious about data consumption, how much they can afford. And honestly, smartphones aren't great teaching devices unless you're just passively looking at YouTube videos. So we need to give them a better experience. So our hypothesis is we want to give them an experience which is at least as good as a rich kid would have. That's why we're giving them the PCs.
Have you heard the term micro school, and would that
Yes,
apply to
that's
what you're doing?
absolutely. So we actually call ourselves nano schools.
Oh, great. There's another term now that I need to remember.
Not really. No. It's so again, yes, you're absolutely right. And I've been inspired by a lot of that stuff. So I'm a big believer in the unschooling concept and the homeschooling concept, but all these are baby steps everyone needs to take. So we think the initial entry point would be after school tuition classes, because that's less threatening for most parents. And if we can say, hey, your kid's learning so much better thanks to these PCs, then hopefully they'll start being willing to have an open mind and explore stuff. But like I said, it's a journey. I don't expect any quick results. I think this will all take at least 5 times as long as we think it will. I don't think the
Sure.
technology is going to be a limiting factor. Because when you're talking about education, it's such a touchy, sensitive issue. And part of the problem is a lot of this is hijacked by all these startup edtech unicorns in India. Things like Byju's and PhysicsWallah, which have huge selling budgets. And as a result of which, a lot of this stuff gets consumed by them. And more importantly, I think a lot of people had a very bad experience with online schooling during COVID. So they don't understand really how much better online schooling really is. So it's
Oh,
not going to
wow.
be easy. There are
Yeah.
lots of preconceived notions. And change is always hard to bring about, and people will have a lot of inertia, especially for something which is so critically important as how their kids get educated.
I am so glad I invited you to co-host because you are the perfect co-host for this topic. And I'm very interested in what you're doing and happy to support. Sume, maybe you could share a little bit about the micro schools that we're helping people build. It sounds similar in some ways, although we're not shipping hardware.
Yes,
But the concept, like the challenges that you're laying out are very much the same. Like the way that we've had people engage in these micro schools, they'll spend maybe only an hour or two a day using the platform to engage with each other because that's all they really need.
right.
And then the rest of the time they're working on their projects. And like we'll have a lot of our students are entrepreneurs that are trying to make small amounts of money or sometimes more amounts of money by essentially just using these digital platforms because they're able to engage with these platforms without any sort of age restriction the way that it used to be that there were all these barriers. But like my younger daughter Isla, I don't know if she's available. Oh, she's in here. But she recently published a story on Kindle about a year ago, and it's
Mm.
not a huge thing. It's like a 10-page just creative story, and it's really fun to read. And she sold like a few dozen copies and made a little bit of money, but she did that when she was 10, and that's amazing. And the other thing about it that's even more amazing is, well, what if that student was in India where the cost of living is only maybe 15% of the area that we're at? And you wonder, well, why aren't there more, teenagers, for example, that are tutoring app building for kids in the United States? I mean, these can be real powerful career opportunities for some of these young people. But I'm not sure if Sume is available to speak on that. But
Yeah, yeah. Well, the term micro school we use pretty loosely. And it's basically just kind of like anybody who is collaborating with other families to do something in education and provide um, educational experiences and opportunities and resources to each other. And so kind of where we're trying to help with that is giving them a forum in which they can collaborate with each other through our app and allowing them to just kind of provide the aspect that seems to be missing in a lot of people who are homeschooling, which is kind of the social aspect of like how do you find people to connect with on a regular basis, as well as providing like a diverse educational experience of, not necessarily you might how are you supposed to learn about something if you don't even know it exists? And so being able to have many people that are able to collaborate with each other and share kind of like ideas and projects that they're working on. And so that's kind of where we're focused is how do we provide the software solution to allow these people to find each other and connect. And so, yeah, that's kind
and
of
then
what we're
also
working on.
platform, like that's a big hang up for some of these kids, is just
Mm-hmm.
setting up the payments and being able to have the infrastructure to easily break into, say, starting a small business, even just tutoring something. Like one of our students in India, Abhinav, is, well, he's been tutoring kids in America, just like I was mentioning this example. He builds Flutter apps. If anybody here is familiar with that software, it's a Google software that Sume and her team used to build Weequal app. But like this is really powerful for him, and yeah, he gets to put that on his resume. Um, but one another question I have for you, Dr. Malpani, would be like, what do you see as the ways that people that are in our situation where we value having young people from different countries, be able to collaborate together? Like, what are some of the biggest hurdles you think we're going to face when we go to India and we're trying to engage in these communities?
So I think we need to understand that there are quite a lot of homeschooling communities already in India. Lots of them are on Facebook. And all of these are very siloed. So that's one thing I'd strongly suggest you do before you come here is become members of all these Facebook groups, because these are actually people who are homeschooling their kids and they form fairly close communities. So lots of them are in Pune and Bangalore.
Okay,
Also,
that's
you have a
fabulous.
lot of
Thank you.
Sorry, yes. You also have parents who are choosing to send their kids to alternative schools, things like Krishnamurti schools and stuff, who will not follow a traditional curriculum. But let me warn you, these are the outliers. Uh, for most people, and that's 99.99%, because you were schooled yourself, you expect that that's the only way to be able to educate your kids. So I think the biggest hurdle is going to be inertia and the herd mentality. I think I so again, I don't really necessarily think it's going to be a technological solution. I think a lot of it is, do we know someone else who's done it? And once you have these success stories and more of them, and people can understand that actually, hey, you get a much better experience when you're not locked up in a classroom, when you're not studying an obsolete syllabus. But part of the problem is on this Twitter space, it's basically like preaching to the converted, right?
Oh yeah, if you want an echo
How do
chamber,
you reach
man, this
how
is
do you
it.
reach out to all the rest of the unwashed majority? I don't know.
Well, one of the ways we're doing this, and I feel free to critique this, but because so our particular approach to this is project-based learning, but it's probably not what you might think when you first hear that term. So over the past 4 years now, but especially since the pandemic started, Sume's created something like over 1,000 projects that are some kind of digital artifact. Because every time that she goes in to learn something, she's creating something novel and useful out of it. And I can give you like a few examples, but this is the basic model here. And the powerful thing about this is that the parents see the digital resume and they see all these things that she's done, and the competency and the value of that is self-evident. Whereas with a grade, you have no idea really what's behind that grade, right? There's like there's a lack of transparency there. One example of these products or these projects was this, she was teaching other kids how to build apps using this software Flutter, and she was making these like hour-long videos on her YouTube channel, and Tim Sneath, who's the head of Google's app development division, found it and started sharing it all over Twitter. So that was like how she got discovered by these professionals. And then she was being invited to do all these podcasts and talk about it, but they didn't even know she was homeschooled. They just thought it was cool that she was using their software. But the challenge of communication of the model and the value of it is really, really easy when you're actually using the project and digitizing them and making them available to the public.
So I think you're absolutely right. You need more of these success stories. The trouble is that everyone's benchmark is very different. Now, especially in a low-income group, the benchmark is my kid needs to graduate and go to college and get opportunities which were never available to me because I never managed to get an education. So their needs are very different. Their needs are, will my kid be able to learn English? Will my kid acquire digital literacy skills? Will he be able to use a computer? So until we can figure out some of that stuff, a lot of what you're talking about is the high-end stuff, which in some senses might actually be easier because there are lots of very rich Indian parents who are very ambitious and who want their kids to have online portfolios and proof of learning because they understand that, you know, a degree is no longer going to be enough of a signal going forward in the future. I'm not sure how to reach out to them though. So I guess, you know, until you actually figure out that, but it's very doable because, you know, these parents have the money, they have the capability, they're seeing what Elon Musk is doing with Synthesia. How do you make that aspirational and how do you make that a premium product?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up Tesla because that's been, we're kind of using that model where he started out with the Roadster, which was, well, it was a high-end product and it was targeting a particular audience and it wasn't meant to scale. And I think you're probably taking a very similar tact. I mean, when people apply to this program and you're going to shell out 10 computers, I mean, you're trying to find the very best possible core user of this solution, right? So that's one. But the other reason why we're doing it is that we're not actually charging the students. So the way the platform makes money is if we're successful in helping them make money, then we would take a cut from that. But to actually have them engage, like, I mean, we don't necessarily need to charge money because a lot of these kids, well, if they're like this, if they're these like Tesla Roadster kids, then they're already like Abhinav, where at 15, he's making $500 a month building software solutions for other companies. So it's like, he doesn't need a program where he can get babysat. He just needs like a community and to be empowered so that he can find more clients and showcase how cool he is. So that's what we're trying to do.
I think, you know, I think given the fact that India has 1.2 billion people, I think there's enough of a market of high-end aspirational parents who have the money and would be very happy to participate. But, you know, because I'm an angel investor, I also think the only way to answer some of these questions is to release a minimal viable product and see what the response is. And the reality is an Indian market will be very different from any others. And the only way to figure it out is to actually try it out. And because you already have success stories, I think hopefully it should be a little bit easier. And, you know, that's one advantage of coming from the US because I mean, you know, for better or for worse, we still have this colonial mindset. So, hey, if it's happening in the US, it must be better than what's happening in India. And therefore, if, you know, that's where it's coming from. So we need to give it this thing. So I know that sounds a little...
No, I get where you're coming from. And if only that were true. I think we're the only developed country that has a decreasing life expectancy.
But you know what?
It's
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the reality is. What matters is
right.
perception. So if you brand it as a US product, which is, making waves in the US and is now available to Indian kids for the first time.
Yeah. No, I'm hearing you.
Yeah.
And the angel investor side of this is really powerful too. That was my background. I was helping adult entrepreneurs. I never
Right.
thought I'd be backing my 13-year-old daughter is like probably the best bet I've ever made in my life. So
Yes.
that's a weird backstory. But hey, Chris, how much of what you're doing relates to kind of reaching out more broadly to the developing world, and how much of this is relevant to you?
So I would like to think that I have an impact outside of the States, but like 90% of what I do right now is US based. And I think that's just because right now, as far as courses and programs, everyone that we have on there is based out of the US, and we really haven't done much marketing as far as expanding. But what we're trying to teach and with the courses and programs on our platform are marketable skills that can be used worldwide. I mean, you can learn how to code, you can learn how to market, you can learn anything to be able to make money remotely. And so the reason I was excited about this conversation was I needed to start thinking on how to expand and really start figuring out how to serve some of these other communities.
Well, one of the ways you can do that, and I would be more than happy, I'd be honored and privileged to help, is that we've decided, or I've decided, because I'm going to make sure I stick to it, doing these every day, except maybe on the weekends, all the way through our trip. And because the different topics that we want to talk about, like we're already having these conversations within the team every day. But now I'm getting out of Sume's way because she's the developer, not me. And I'm just moving those conversations onto Twitter Spaces. So as we go through this trip through India, we'll be traveling around and hitting new topics, basically letting the audience that seems to be resonating with the broader vision and mission of what we're trying to do, which is essentially this global school concept, building that ecosystem, but really actively reaching out and listening to core users. Like I'm totally in the same ballpark here as Dr. Malpani, that if you're not listening very closely and trying to solve the problems of the people on the ground that are supposed to be the ones that are using your product, then you're not doing this right. So I'll be doing this. And if you join in, then I think that part of this is just being able to bridge that communication gap. Now, it's just a question of time, because if it's valuable and it's on the internet, there really isn't a reason why it shouldn't be accessed by anybody in the world. But of course, just a lot of the natural ways that probably, I mean, I noticed that you and I are both middle-aged white guys. Like, it's just not our network. That's why we're going. We're
Yeah,
like,
but
we just have to go and travel
yeah,
across
but
this
Joe,
country.
the trouble is I'm a white-haired Indian. So again, I'm not really your demographic, quite frankly. I'm a bit of a dinosaur, and my kids are all grown up and stuff. But I think, because your heart is in the right place, and I think you need to spend a little bit of time on creating a little bit of branding. And I think Cialdini's principle of influence, where, hey, this is coming from the US, this is what we can do, uh, this is what progressive parents in the US are doing for the following reasons. If you took that tack, I think lots of interesting things might happen.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Yeah. Well, we'll keep listening to you, and thank you so much for sharing more about what you're doing. I'm happy to open up the discussion to others. I'm just inviting folks to speak.
I would like to ask Dr. Malpani, what is the condition of the local school system in India? I know India is a big place, but on average, what is the government or state-run schools? What kind of education are they offering?
So basically, I would say there are three kinds of schools. There are the government schools. Most of them have major problems. They're overcrowded. They're free. Lots of people will go to government schools more for a midday meal necessarily than because they expect an education. There's a high degree of absenteeism. Having said all this, there are some great devoted teachers who really go out of their way because they love kids and care about them. But it's an uphill battle and the odds are stacked against them. You also have some high-end IB schools, international schools, which are as good as any school anywhere in the world. They're air-conditioned, they have swimming pools, their students are expats, they charge an arm and a leg, they have long waiting lists for people to actually get in, and they provide everything.
All right, Seemany, we need our swimming pool.
You then have two other sets of schools. You will have the regular private schools, which will charge a fee, which middle-class parents can afford. But because parents aren't really convinced, because the classes are fairly busy, they will also supplement most of this stuff with tuition classes. And in fact, I honestly think more kids go to tuition classes in India than they go to schools, especially in the 8th and the 9th and the 10th standard when they're sitting for the school leaving exam. And finally, you will have what I call the affordable private schools, which no one talks about for some reasons in the urban slums. And these are usually micro entrepreneurs. These are usually young graduates or someone else who cares about kids, teaches them, will then provide very affordable lessons within the community itself. And that's really something which we want to target. And we want to say, hey, you know what? You're already teaching kids. You're doing a great job. We're going to give you computers at a subsidized rate and show us that you can do a better job. So that's the other set of experiments we're running.
I love all that. I want to introduce Robert and Dave here in just a second, but I also, before I forget, because we're going down and because you're already engaged with folks, I'm going to send you a list of all the cities that we're going to go visit. And if you have any micro schools in those cities, we're happy to meet them up. We'll do a podcast there. It'll be great. I would just love that.
Sounds good.
I'm gonna have to re-listen to this whole thing just because I feel like you're just sharing gold nugget after gold nugget. But hey Dave, how's it going?
Hey everyone, hopefully you can hear me today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for popping in on Monday. As you can see, this is getting rather exciting. I've already agreed to commit doing this Monday through Friday all the way through our trip to India and back, and we're getting back on June 20th. So I'm going to be doing a lot of spaces here. But I also wanted to introduce Robert, who I met on LinkedIn or Facebook, who's been, we were talking about how to help raise kids that are anti-fragile. So Robert, you feel free to also come in and introduce yourself after Dave. But Dave, if you want to share a bit about yourself, then we can go to Robert.
Yeah, there's probably not a lot to share that's relevant right now. I run a web design business 14 years, and I have created a side business which is a framework to help people improve focus by grouping your mental effort with the tasks in front of you rather than planning in a linear fashion, kind of working by capability rather than working by a task list. But it's always an interesting conversation here, so I look forward to what we're going to dive into.
Sure, sounds great. Well, I think everybody here is interested in focus, so I encourage you to check out Dave's stuff. Hey, Robert, did you want to come in here and share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Robert McKay. I run an education company called Ignite Academic. And yeah, super excited to meet Joe. I think it was on Facebook we connected.
Okay.
And yeah, so I worked in schools for like 10 years, a lot of project-based, some weird little startup schools and stuff, and got kind of disillusioned with, like the last one was a public school here in the US, and just the resources, despite, like you were saying, we're a rich country, but our, human development indicators, not so great. And, schools are so under-resourced, you really can't execute project-based learning in a real way. And that's not to ding the people trying to do it because they're, heroic, but yeah, you really just can't, you can't do it to a high standard. So kind of decided to go for like what someone was mentioning earlier, kind of go for the high-end client first, try to build it out, and then, figure out how to democratize it. Very interested in platform co-ops, very interested in, Dr. Mopani was mentioning, is it Bijou, one of the big ed techs, and maybe not playing the most salutary role. I'm definitely critic of many of the big platforms, which are quite exploitative. So trying to build a different type of tutoring platform, that's one aspect of the business. Talking to Start.coop, Start.coop, however you say it. It's like an incubator accelerator for platform co-ops. Hopefully want to give the tutors equity eventually. And pay them much better than most of those other platforms. And then the other side of it is like I'm really passionate about financial literacy and kind of heterodox economics, intellectual diversity, right? Somebody was mentioning the need for kind of a diverse education, and of course that's representational, right? But that also intellectual diversity, right? It's not that's a big problem in FinLit and econ. So, and especially when it comes to like you're talking about representation, like rich white men from the global north pretty much completely dominate that discipline, right? And kind of those perspectives, neoclassical econ. So we're trying to change that and do some consulting and do curriculum development around that stuff. But yeah, just like super excited to meet folks that are thinking in all these outside the box ways and willing to go out on a limb and try something really different. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think I might just quick. Oh, actually, Dave, sorry, go ahead. And then I've got a question I want to pose to everybody.
Yeah, something came to mind when I was listening there. Yesterday when you guys had a space and you couldn't hear me and I was breaking up, I was actually in the car and I was on the way to meet a school principal and discuss websites and apps and stuff like that to help them. And one thing that came out of that meeting that I see is quite prevalent is there's a want to actually do something and help students, but normally there is that technical hurdle that I think as humans, it's very easy to say, yes, we will do this with the best aspirations in mind. But actually, when it comes into the execution, the dopamines wear off in that part. So I'm really interested in where AI and where technology can actually help us be more true to our word and remove those technical barriers as well.
Dr. Malpani, would you like to opine on that?
With a lot of this stuff, I've realized that, there's just so much opportunity and it's very hard to be able to predict, what's going to work, what's not going to work. I think there are lots of people who have their heart in the right place. I think India is a surprisingly rich country if you can tap into, people who are interested in helping. And I think everyone has a soft corner for kids. Everyone has a soft corner for education. So I think there's actually lots of scope. Having said all this, I think there are lots of vested interests. It's very hard to change some of this stuff. So I don't think we should underestimate any of this. But the reality is that if we create enough positive deviance and enough success stories over a period of time, that's the only way to make some of these changes happen. Is Abhishek around? Can you Abhishek?
I've invited everybody to share here.
He speak? I don't know whether he's this thing, but Abhishek actually, one of the people who runs one of the Apni Pathshalas in Chennai, and I think he would be, I'm just a big picture thinker, whereas he's the guy who actually implements a lot of that stuff. So if he would be willing to share, that'd be great.
I think he's sitting there with a blue check mark with a dog on his.
Yes, chest. That's the one. Yes, yeah, let me see if I can. Let me WhatsApp him.
I did invite him to join here. So add a speaker. Okay, there you go, Abhishek. Come on in. Tell us all about yourself. So you're working with Dr. Malpani. I think you're on mute. Maybe while we're waiting for Abhishek, I want to share one thing about how we're trying to overcome this challenge of this dopamine hit focus when it comes to social media. So one of the things the reason why my daughters are both on here, they're ages 11 and 13. I was showing them charts of the Jonathan Haidt work showing the increasing suicide and self-harm rates of young girls. Basically in response to social media. That's his argument. And, if you're not familiar with the work, then I'd encourage you to go look at it. But it was quite terrifying to me. Give 2 daughters. So I was teaching them how to build apps with the goal of really just inoculating them by giving them a lot of knowledge and wisdom. It wasn't because I thought that they were going to actually keep doing it for 5 years. It was because I just thought that education is the solution because I can't hide them from the world. But one of the things that we've been doing, like as an example of how we're trying to help use technology to be valuable, is this is just one way, is helping kids to start monetizing their YouTube channel by actually selling some kind of product or service so they can start to translate subscribers into money with only like a few dozen followers, right? And so just being able to put out really useful videos explaining how to do something, but then offering that as a service. This is something that I think that we're going to be talking about all over India, because it's amazing how, you can, with a much lower cost of living, you can still signal, and if you can speak English well, and if you can teach well, there's no reason why you can't compete head to head in virtual tutoring against adult professional teachers living in the United States. Like I look at that and I think if I was a 13 or 15 or 16-year-old boy or girl in India, I would be gunning for this market right now. And so we're not even needing to have this stuff like saved on our platform. We're not going to compete with YouTube, but we're just going to help create an ecosystem that makes it easier for kids to take advantage of some of these real world learning opportunities. Because it's just really exciting. Oh, hey, Abhishek.
I think that's great that you're providing that sense of empowerment as, hey, there's lots of stuff which could be happening. Couple of things. One is a lot of times the parents are the decision makers, not the kids. And the second is parents are very worried about the screen time their kids are spending. And they often don't differentiate between constructive screen time and destructive screen time. So you're going to have to spend a little bit of time on education. And I think the best way to do that would be to project Sume as, this is what she can do. And if she can do it, then, why can't your kid? Abhishek, yours.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, Doctor. Good evening, Joe, Sume, everyone. So I was listening to the conversation, very, very interesting. As I just want to say, I run Learn with Comics. We make comics out of school lessons. But I just want to talk about what you guys are doing. And I think it's a fantastic idea. So I think Dr. Malpani would have spoken about Apni Pathshala. So I mentor one of those pods in Chennai. So it's like a micro school where this is in one of the most dangerous parts of Chennai, South India, where I live. So the entire neighborhood is, filled with former criminals, and these are all first generation learners. And Dr. Malpani found one lady, who's been running this show for the last 14 years. And it's one of the most dangerous places, in Tamil Nadu, Chennai, I would say. And we are working on empowering these children. And it's been very, very, very challenging. We have around 5-6 computers there right now. But you said, what Joe was just saying about monetizing YouTube. The first thing is we need to get them there, right? So it's not like, we see the opportunity. There is a lot of opportunity, and we have a lot of human resource potential in India. And we have to leverage it, but it has to be done in phases. So I think our Apni Pathshala, the entire idea is, I think, laying the groundwork for that. It will grow in the future, but I think wherever, I don't know you're visiting, but I think you should visit one of these pods. So I think overall,
no, I already suggest. Hey, Sume, what cities are we hitting?
We're hitting Chandigarh, Bangalore, Nagpur, Pune, and Hyderabad.
Oh, she has
and
the list
Delhi
on Twitter. I think you pinned it to your profile.
Yeah, I don't know if it's pinned, but it is one of my most recent tweets. But I think that's all of them. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you have one covered east, west, north, south, I think. So yeah, I mean, that should make a huge difference. So we are working on a common curriculum. As Doctor was saying, we have different types of schools in India, but we have around 220 million children going to school in India right now. And I think 50% or less will be in government schools. And different states have different levels of government schools. Some are really good, as Doctor was saying, some have amazing teachers, some don't even have teachers. They don't even show up to work. So, I mean, it would, with India, you need to visit a lot more places, and you need to do it in the rural area. Like if you say Nagpur is pretty developed, as far as I know. So is Hyderabad, so is Bangalore. So these are all developed places. You find government schools, they'll be pretty decent. They would be, I would say, a 6 on 10. But you need to travel 50, 100 kilometers away from the city. That's where the real learning happens or not happens. So you
So I
should
would
check
But
that.
love to do
Abhishek,
that. Yeah.
we have a
So,
pod in Gurgaon. We have a pod in Gurgaon. We have one in Delhi. So I think maybe you can do the introduction so they can go visit that at least. They're all
yes,
in low
definitely.
income. They're all in low income. Cool.
Yes, Delhi has that amazing pod, and so does Haryana, where Isha is running. That is in a really rural area, and I think these are the first computers what we have given doctor. Those are the first computers in that school.
Mm.
I don't even know, 72 years, I think. That's the first computer in that school. So
We
we have
haven't
around,
booked we haven't booked these yet. So when we're pointing out these cities, we've really been looking for folks that are interested in what we're doing to reach out and say, hey, we'd like to meet. I am more than happy to find out where your success stories are now, like where these micro schools are, and go and do podcasts there and collaborate with you. Because so part of the reason why we weren't initially looking at going into the countryside is that our CTO who lives in India, he was mostly just worried about Sume. It was more of a safety thing. And so, because he hasn't traveled around, and so the only reason why we weren't looking to go was because we're also hiring developers. So we're basically reaching out to Flutter developers and
right.
wanting to meet them. And so where are they? They're in like Bangalore, but would very much love to find out where these locations are so we can book them and go meet.
Absolutely. Well, I'll share it with you wherever we have the pods. I'll share the entire list. And these are all not just pods, where we've set up with a lot of interesting and these are all social impact entrepreneurs. They've been working and they're all like I'm 39. So people around my age or even younger, 32, 33, some people as young as 21, 22. So we have these amazing parts, and I think that would give you a fair idea of what happens because we've done a lot of work before setting up these pods. So I'll send you a list of really cool places that you could visit, have some sort of a learning, and probably we could take it from there once you guys decide where you
That sounds perfect. That sounds perfect. I see we've got, hey, Chris, do you want to jump in? And then I see that we've got another gentleman here that would like to share. I will hard stop this at 11, but we're going to keep doing this Monday through Friday, all the way up through at least June 20th. So if you're interested in joining that, just keep looking for my pinned tweet. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Dr. Malpani how much of he started to touch on it a little bit, but how much of this is going to be somewhat a cultural challenge versus anything else? Because it seemed like you were like, for us, at least for me, when I think of education and think of just how Americans view it, they're like, yeah, we want our children to get educated, and if that means if online is the best education, then that makes sense. But how does the culture of India view online education?
So, I mean, very honestly, because there are at least 200 million parents, you'll get 400 million answers to that. And for a lot of
Nice.
low-income parents, it's the only way out of their poverty trap. And I think even for other parents, it's extremely important that kids get a good education. Multiple reasons, gives you some job security, gives you some way of, being able to make ends meet. And parents will spend a lot of money and time and energy on making sure their kids get a good education. So I think culturally, that's not an issue at all. It's highly valued in Indian society. It's just that they don't get good value for their money and they don't know what to do about it. They feel, government schools aren't good enough, or, the classes there are 40, 50 kids in a class. The teacher doesn't have enough time and energy to spend on my kid. My kid is falling behind and I don't know what to do. And they're not confident enough to tap into some of these online resources because they've never done it themselves. So I think if we can give them that confidence, and that's one of the things we hope will happen, is that once these kids go to these community centers and learn, and kids are learning machines. And once they do that, then hopefully some of these changes will happen. But I'm not holding my breath, very honestly.
Yeah, another problem with just trying to even have that conversation is that when people say virtual school, they mean
Mm.
vastly different things. My daughters
Yes.
hated virtual public school. That's like one of the main reasons why they dropped out was that they were supposed
Yes.
to sit there in front of the screen for 7 hours a
Yes.
day,
Yes.
and they weren't
Yes.
doing anything that they had any autonomy over guiding, and they would get in trouble for
Perfect.
doing their homework too fast.
Perfect.
So that's totally different than like say some of these virtual clubs where we're already engaged with kids in India where they just share an interest. And so they're not going onto the platform because they have to check in and for roll call. They're doing it because they want to meet with other kids that share their interest in ChatGPT or app building, right? So it's like you're using the technology not because you're forced to use the technology. You're using the technology because it helps you achieve some kind of actual real goal, right? And why people think that that's supposed to be different for kids than adults is beyond me. But kids are basically just adults with less experience, right? So like the incentive mechanisms should pretty much be the same. They like autonomy. They like to do real things. They like to engage with people that share their interests. And, they like to create value for other people. Everybody gets, warm, fuzzy feelings from that. But anyway, that's just my 2
Yes.
cents. But
But you're right. I think a lot of Indian parents have been scarred by the COVID experience, and they still think of this as online Zoom classes and nothing else. So again, you could have take spend some. The reality with a lot of this stuff is you need to start with where the parents are, and then you need to convince them that there are better alternatives, and that's why it's such a slow process.
okay. I do want to get to Mr. Singh, and I'm not going to try to pronounce your first name, but maybe you could teach us. And then I am going to hard stop this here at 11. But please do introduce yourself.
A very good evening from India. I'm from Dehradun, that is from Uttarakhand, the educational hub of India. And I'm very, I'm following Dr. Malpani from last 1 week, and I saw his tweet very interesting to see that how coaching institute are promoting making a new normal. That is, coaching is essential, and without coaching you can't succeed. I'm listening to this topic, that is the Global School Initiative and virtual learning. And as a teacher, I am also learning new things here. And I would like to thank Mr. Dr. Malpani for providing this platform to me. I will definitely give my inputs after listening to or joining this space next time, because I'm a little late to join this, but I'm interested and looking forward for the virtual learning community. Thank you so much.
We
Yeah, well,
actually
thank
have
you.
pods in Dehradun, incidentally, so you should go check those out.
Do
Okay.
you have a website, Dr. Malvani? Do you want
Yes.
to share? Okay.